Everyone has moments in life they can't just stop thinking about. They can be embarrassing things, like that one time you face planted in front of a group of teenagers, or something amazing like the first time you hosted your family for the holidays. And on Baby, This is Keke Palmer, hosted by me, Keke Palmer, and presented by BMW, we know to savor the good memories and let go of the bad. And one thing everyone remembers fondly is their first time behind the wheel of a BMW. So come join me and BMW this summer as we explore pop culture moments and topics you just can't stop thinking about on Baby, This is Keke Palmer, sponsored by BMW, the ultimate driving machine.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th.
We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
In each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is Rob Jabbaz. He's an animator and the writer and director behind the disturbing festival favorite, The Sadness. We also hear that he's a self-proclaimed spicy boy. Welcome to the show.
That's me. Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm happy to be here on the Scarred for Life podcast. I actually take umbrage with the fact that, or with the statement that it's self-proclaimed. I've been called by many third parties a spicy boy.
Apologies, he is a professional spicy boy.
That's absolutely true. I get paid good money to be spicy.
We like spice. Okay, so let's take it back to the beginning, though. How did you get introduced to horror?
Oh, well, I mean, here's a good sort of soundbite for you. Is that my birthday is on Halloween, so my earliest memories of like Halloween are sort of intertwined with having all the attention and being kind of like the Halloween party being sort of my birthday party. And then during like the month of October leading up to Halloween, it's all the best movies are on TV. And like, I guess I'm associating it with me, like sort of the countdown to my big day. And when I'd go trick-or-treating, like I'd always get like, the big, like O. Henry or whatever, or the big, do you guys have those in America, O. Henry?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And then they give all the other kids just a little one and be like, it's Robert's birthday. He gets the big one, So that's the way it would go down. Yeah. In the neighborhood, with the neighborhood kids. So I think that did a lot. That went a long way towards making me just sort of enjoy horror and spookiness in general.
I know some of my friends that were born around Christmas and they ended up hating it because they would get associated with Christmas. It sounds like that's kind of the opposite for you.
Well, here's the thing, is that those friends really need to do a little bit of thinking, because what's wrong with being associated with our Lord Jesus Christ, and I should also mention, like, here's a good sort of way to differentiate the two, is that Halloween isn't necessarily thought of as like a gift giving holiday, whereas Christmas is. So like, so the Halloween kid, it gets gifts in addition to the candy, whereas like the Christmas kid just gets like the same amount of gifts as everyone else, and therefore he just feels like he's getting what's the word, bamboozled, on his gifts.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. I pretty much put that to rest for you. I don't have to wonder anymore.
Perfect. Do you remember what your first horror movie was, or your first introduction to like the genre?
I have a very vivid memory of watching Predator with my father one time.
Oh yeah,
that's like the first time I really. It was this like it definitely wasn't the first one, but that's just the one that I feel like I was the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in New Jersey. We were visiting my uncle, and he was like, Predator was. I think Predator might have just came out on, like on satellite or whatever, or on video.
Okay.
So I guess that might have been like 88 or so. And yeah, I don't know. I just remember just sitting with my dad and kind of feeling like, yeah, I'm watching a movie I'm not supposed to be watching, and it's all about like tough guys, and I'm having sort of like a manly father and son experience here with all these oiled up muscles on TV, fucking just loving life right now, just feeling like I'm becoming a man,
I get that urge or that feeling, because that was one of the things when I was a kid and you'd watch rated R movies, like, ooh, I'm watching something I shouldn't be watching. I'm more adult than the 8 years old I was or whatever.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Well, that's my favorite, because my parents were divorced and my dad would show me movies that my mom would never let me watch. So I was like, ooh, don't tell mom. Yep. I'm going to get in trouble.
Yeah. He's like, yeah, your fucking mom won't let you watch these fucking movies, will she? Yeah. Like he's kind of trying to make it seem like, his house is way more fun than your mom's house. Like that.
Yeah. Like that was our thing. Like horror was our thing. And like my mom didn't hate it, but like did not like it. So it was like, that was kind of the vibe. It was like, your mom won't let you watch horror movies, but I will. And now here we are.
That happened when my parents got divorced. It was, they used to like weaponize the children against each other, kind of like that too. Although yours sounds a lot more lightweight. What?
Oh, just oof! Like that's just bad. It just sucks. Like I get that feeling. It's the worst.
It's just what happens, Like it's just part and parcel with the process. It's best for us just to look back on it and laugh.
Yeah.
Try to laugh.
Did horror movies scare you as a kid, or were you pretty immune to them?
Oh, they scared the fucking shit out of me, I think is the best way to put it. Like I remember just I don't know, things like I remember getting really, really worked over by The Gate, the 1987 The Gate.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe because you could so clearly place yourself in that scenario because it was about kids, but it was sort of like grown up sort of style horror. And I really related to that metal kid, like to that goofy metal kid named Terry, I believe was the name of the kid in that movie. Mm-hmm. And there's that part where he's like jumping up and down on his bed, air guitaring, and then the part of the record comes on where it's like in the ancient times, and he grabs like a cloak and puts it over his and it's like that's just a little too close to me, like that it's actually gets a little bit scary, being kind of like a little kid but kind of wanting to be into the occult was something that I could really relate to. Like I desperately wanted to be like someone who had governance over the occult as a child, because I thought it just would be cool to like raise a demon or something. I think that Ghoulies was also another one that not that scared me, but that made me kind of like if I just draw the right symbols on the ground, maybe I can actually make something happen,
I used to do that all the time as a kid. I had such an overactive imagination. I'd see something, a spell, or like I used to watch a lot of fantasy movies, and so I'd go there chanting the words, hoping that something crazy would happen. The Gate is definitely one of those kind of gateway horror for kids, but it was one that Mary Beth and I had never watched until last year for the podcast, and I wish that I had that memory of watching it as a kid, because that's a wild movie.
Yeah, it's really like a lot better than it kind of needed to be as well, and I guess maybe that's why it has such a long. How do you say? That's why it's so enduring. Why why people kind of today are still kind of being like, The Gate is still kind of on a lot of people's like whatever top 10 lists of sort of best movies to put on like around Halloween or whatever, because it's not like a really scary movie, but it's just a good. I believe that Halloween is actually the time when you should be watching sort of spooky movies, like fun spooky movies.
Yes.
Whereas the rest of the year you should be watching like your Serbian
most fucked up shit,
Inner Human Centipedes and all that kind of shit. But Halloween is time to sort of enjoy horror and to and to get spooked out with your friends.
I agree.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So kind of transitioning to for being an adult, do you still get scared watching horror movies at all, or are you as immune to it as Mary Beth and I?
No, I try to. I actively try to. That's the fun. Like that's the fun, is to kind of suspend your disbelief and go in and try to get scared. At them, I just saw The Night House the other day. I was in Portugal, and it doesn't wrap up as nicely as I would have liked, but the way getting there, like the journey to get to that unsatisfying finale, there are some really good spook outs there, you know? And I was sitting in the theater, and I was just kind of like, oh man, I'm spooked out. This is awesome. Like I love that. I love that feeling. And I try to surrender to the film because that's the fun. It's kind of like when you know how like when you smoke weed and you get all like weird and paranoid sometimes?
Yes.
Like
yes.
I actually really, well, maybe not so much anymore because I don't really smoke as much weed anymore. But when I was younger, I used to love that feeling. I used to love just that like super out of control feeling. And because it just, as long as like, I mean, usually like if I was just by myself, it wasn't fun. But if I was like with like one or two of my good friends, and I guess that sort of nullifies the weird paranoid feeling. But I guess it's just fun to get sort of paranoid with a bunch of other people or something, because it doesn't feel so bad. It takes the edge off. But that uncomfortable weed smoking paranoid feeling was usually why I was smoking weed. Like that's, I kind of wanted to get there because I thought it was kind of funny and kind of entertaining also, because it's just so intense. And there's a lot of I don't know, I have a lot of good memories of getting super paranoid smoking too much weed and stuff, and I don't know. I like to put myself in vulnerable situations because rather situations where I become vulnerable because it's fun. That's why you go on a roller coaster and all you can do is just trust the engineers who built it. You know, it's just kind of like, oh god, you know, I just have to try to get through this. You know, endure this.
I'm pretty sure that's not going to take off in my head, but let's try anyway. I always had that fear of like when you're going on the roller coaster and that you're like, they make it so that you almost are like coming within like, you know, feet of that thing, but it feels like so much closer. And it's just got to trust. Yep.
Absolutely.
So what draws you to horror now as an adult? I mean, besides getting scared, like what about the genre draws you to keep watching it and also work in it?
I don't know. I think that it's just I'm not really sure, actually, to be honest. Like I watch everything. Like I watch like every movie that comes out. I'll try to watch it.
Wow.
But I go, you know, I go back. Like I really like what do you call that? Like a lot, like sort of 70s, like 70s sort of like crime espionage, like you know, like Marathon Man, and you know, like the old sort of non-Exorcist William Friedkin movies, like French Connection, and like I mean, a little bit later in the 80s is To Live and Die in L.A., which is like just such an underrated, awesome movie, and all the Francis Ford Coppola stuff, and I mean, just like I love that stuff's not like obscure or anything, but that kind of stuff, I just think like that 70s sort of crime period, I think is just amazing. But as far as like horror is concerned, I'm not really sure. I think it's just like I guess maybe I just like the craft of a lot of it. Like I really like special effects. I really like gore. I really like what do I like? I like sort of the creativity that comes in with creature design. I just like the craft of it. Like I'm before filmmaking and before anything else, I was a drawer, right? Like I used to draw lots of monsters and comics and stuff like that, and read tons of comics and just, you know, that kind of stuff. I guess it's just one of those things. Like I just always, maybe it comes all the way back from the first thing, from the Halloween being kind of associating Halloween with sort of warmth and familial love is kind of what you know. You just kind of, some people stop drawing pictures as they get older, and some people just keep doing it. And I guess I'm one of those people who just kept doing it. Except I happen to be drawing monsters and chainsaw attacks and stuff. You know.
Hell yeah.
I guess that's it. I guess I'm just kind of afraid to grow up, and I'm just sort of hiding in a sort of perpetual infancy. And it probably has a lot to do with, repressed feelings about my mother and father or something,
Yeah,
Probably.
Okay, so I know you watch a lot of horror movies, like you just said. So what are some of the ones that you've seen recently that like really wowed you?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know if it counts, but Titan.
Oh yeah, that certainly counts.
Oh, I can't wait to see it. I cannot wait. I feel like I'm the last person
so good.
to fucking see that movie.
I was really, I won't spoil it for you, Mary, but I will say that I was like really, really surprised and also like really impressed and also to some degree relieved that about how sort of sweet and sort of about unconditional love it actually is. Like the whole the message of the movie is just about like absolute acceptance and absolute sort of forgiveness and love coming from a place that you wouldn't expect. And it's just like what a sweet, deeply emotional movie this is, kind of surrounded, like clad in spiky black metal armor or something, like
that is the perfect descriptor for it.
Got it. Nailed it. So yeah, I loved that movie, although I wouldn't really call it it has elements of like horror in it, but really I just call it sort of like nothing really. I'd say that it's genre agnostic. Maybe the only way you can say it is sort of like maybe a drama with sort of genre garnishes upon it, I suppose. But so like let's talk about real horror. I don't know. Like why don't you Terry, why don't you go ahead and say one, and then maybe I'll think of one as we're talking.
Gosh, well, I'll Malignant. I loved Malignant.
Oh, I never saw it.
It's so James Wan's movie. It's so just batshit bonkers and just goes for broke, and it's deliciously gory and wild, and you never know where it's gonna go, and it surprised the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe I'll check that one out. I haven't really been able to. I've only been able to see like these like festival movies because I don't have I'm from Taiwan, so I don't have like Amazon Prime and stuff. I have Netflix, but there's like nothing on Netflix. Yeah, I gotta get to. I guess I need to make some time to go to a theater or something and see Malignant. But
yeah, well, I does because you're in Canada right now, right? Mm-hmm. Does Canada have HBO Max?
Yeah, like probably. Yeah, they do.
Because it's on there. It's streaming on HBO Max right now.
Yeah, it's just that like I'm staying at my mom's right now, and she just has Netflix, and that's it. And I'm not trying to fucking get all these like subscriptions and, and then canceling them.
Blood Red Sky is pretty good. It's on Netflix.
Oh, okay, let's talk about that for a second. I actually was so disappointed in that movie because
really, okay.
And I'll tell you why. So, whatever, spoilers, etc. The part, how like there's like that psycho guy, like the bad guy who's like, I enjoy killing people, and he's like, he puts his knife into the guy's eye and everything. He's actually scarier before he becomes a vampire, because like when he becomes a vampire, he just loses all of his. And this actually relates very much to like my film, The Sadness, is that what makes an antagonist scarier is intention and malice, and like, I am doing this and I know exactly what I'm doing and I'm fully aware of what I'm doing, and also, you know what, it actually makes my dick a little hard to hurt you this way, like that thought process is actually the scariest thing. Whereas when that guy becomes a vampire, he just turns into like a snarling animal, and all of a sudden it's not as scary anymore. So I was just like, wow, like what a missed opportunity there, like you could have just had this guy, maybe all of the other guys kind of become like animals, but he becomes himself, like he just becomes this like supercharged like killer guy, that would have been I think the better way to do it. That's the way I would have done it. But anyways, yeah. But in any case, yeah, like I mean, I definitely enjoyed kind of like how snappy that movie moved along, but then I guess it kind of lost its engine maybe around the time when it got too vampire-y. I really like, I enjoyed very much, and I think it was a very creative film. This movie, Censor.
Yes. Oh, Censor's so good. I love Censor.
I just liked how I forget her name. Her name's like
Prano Bailey Bond.
Right. Yeah. I just sent her a message the other day, and I was just like, hey, we're both award-winning directors now. I figured we have enough in common that we can start talking. She's like, aha. And so she's going to be at Sitges as well. I'm going to Sitges this weekend, and hopefully I'll be able to meet her and we can shoot the shit about some horror movies and stuff too. But the thing is I really liked the first 40 minutes of that film. Like I thought, like the rest of it is good too, but I was particularly impressed by the first 40, like the way that she gets like sort of British, like sort of bureaucratic environments and the costume design and sort of the sort of oppressiveness of, and it reflects upon sort of the stuffiness of this character, and also really good like sort of consideration about like sort of when to keep the camera still and when to move it and stuff, and just really good sort of filmmaking sort of stuff like that. She's a very, very talented director. Did you know that she's going to be working with the producer of Call Me by Your Name to do an adaptation of I think it's called Things We Lost in the Fire.
Oh, really?
Really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's it. That was just announced a little while ago, like a Variety or some fucking bullshit entertainment magazine. But
I missed that. That's awesome.
So, yeah, she's going places. Cheers to her.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you did bring up the sadness, and I know that you're probably tired of talking about that film. But can you tell our listeners a little bit about what it's about?
Well, it's just about a virus that changes people into like homicidal sex perverts.
Yeah, that is pretty much the movie.
Like that.
Yeah.
Watching it in the sort of COVID-ness that we are in, one of the questions I've been dying to ask you, and you probably have answered this before, is when did you guys film this? And were you writing it with COVID in mind, or is this sort of like a happy, unhappy happenstance?
No, it was written in like, maybe like the end of April to like, maybe like the end of April towards like the middle of May of last year, 2020. So like pandemic was absolutely going on. In fact, the reason why we got greenlit, why I got greenlit, was because of COVID. Because my financer was just like, we need to make a movie right now. We need to do it right now because Taiwan's open and everywhere else is closed. So if we make a movie, then we're not going to have any competition. And I was just like, okay. And then he just had this idea too of let's just make it about a pandemic. And I was like, but he had a really sort of goofy idea about like, we need to. It's going to be about this like doctor, but he's like, the best doctor in the world, and he needs to find patient zero and all this stuff. And I was just like, I don't want to do that. That sounds stupid. So then I just kind of was like, why don't we just make it like a zombie movie, but instead of zombies, they're homicidal sex perverts. And then he goes, he's like, okay, well, whatever, just write something and whatever. So I wrote the script, and then I think that there was like, luckily, because there was such a fire under our asses to get the thing done, he just didn't like care that much. Like he was just like, look, we could spend 2 months kind of fixing the script, but how much better is it going to be? 10%, 15% better after 2 months, or we could just do it now. And I was like, just let's do it now, and like we'll sort of fix it as we go. Like the storyboard process will be kind of like the second draft, or the third draft rather, and then the actual movie itself will kind of be like the fourth draft, because we'll keep everything kind of open and sort of fluid, allowing for better ideas to come in. And we wrote like a new ending. Like the ending of the film is something that kind of came down the pike during production, and it was a pretty wild and weird production that just kind of, from the time that I put pen to paper, it was like, well, let's just say like May, and then it's like, May, June, July. June, July is like pre-production. August we shot it like in 28 days, and then we did all the post and like special effects and editing and stuff over like September, October, and November, and the sound as well. And then December we just kind of like took a nap, and then we released it in January.
Holy shit!
That's insane. That is an insane timeline.
Yeah, I think that that's just the way movies should get made. I don't know about all this bullshit. Like I hear people working on something for 5 years. I'm just like, whatever. Can you imagine?
Rip that Band-Aid off.
Yeah, exactly. Get up, take a shit, or get off the pot.
You talked a lot about loving gore and special effects. and practical effects, which this movie has, obviously, in spades. So I just wanted to hear more about like what the process was to make all of these horrible things come to life, and like that collaboration in working with like your effects department to make these like sex crazed maniacs as deplorable as possible.
Well, I guess we just tried to think like of the worst thing, like the worst things that we could think of, like the worst things to do to people that we could think of, and it kind of opens up this door, like it's almost like playing like some sort of like sit around in a circle in junior high kind of game or something, you know, like what's the worst thing that you, like if you had to kill someone, if somebody killed your whole family, then you know what I mean, like then what would you do to them, you know? And that's probably actually even how the human centipede, the plot for the human centipede got started, you know, like I think that actually is the story. Regardless, yeah, I mean, like, I guess you want to know more about sort of the special effects, and you know, we just kind of, I just sort of sat around and kind of came up with interesting ways to kind of, you know, kill people on screen, and different sort of maimings and tortures and things like this, and I was thinking, like, I kept in mind like sort of the we have to keep kind of the rhythm and tempo of the film going, and like we can only have so many things that are like this, and then right around this time I feel like maybe the audience will kind of think that they know what's going on, so we'll turn it, and then all of a sudden they'll, like, this will happen, and it's like, oh my god, they're fucking that guy, what the, you know what I mean, like, oh my god, and then later on it's like, okay, well, where can this go from here, and then it's like, okay, well, it can go this way, and this way, or we just, or there's no, maybe one just goes and there's no release from it for like a while, and it's just like, when is this going to end, what the fuck? And then so it's just all about kind of, I mean, all you're making when you're making a movie, I guess from my perspective, all you're doing is just trying to come up with a bunch of sort of emotions, and then you're just trying to kind of chain them together to create an experience, like an experience over a period of time, right? So yeah. You just want it to not be boring.
Your movie is anything but boring. That is for fucking sure.
Thank you, darling. I wanted to say that, yeah, like, I mean, it was really just a matter of coming up with all that stuff. And then after I went to IFSFX Artmaker, which is the studio that did all of our physical effects, and I just sat with them and I showed them my drawings, and we just kind of worked out how to do them together. And I kind of was like, well, I want the camera to be over on this side, so we have to put a tube over here. Or if it's going to be on this side, then we have to run a tube, but we'll put markers on it so we can remove it digitally later and stuff. And so just a lot of planning. And that's the thing with independent filmmaking. It's like, if you plan a lot of it, in some ways it helps, because you know, you waste theoretically you waste less time, but but conversely, if you plan too much, another thing too is that with independent filmmaking is that stuff tends to go wrong. You don't have more time to fix it. So planning stuff can actually be bad, because it doesn't allow you for it doesn't allow for the flexibility of kind of thinking on your feet. So there has to, just like everything else in life, there's no rules. You have to just kind of be able to kind of balance between sort of stick with the plan and think on your feet, you know?
Kind of continuing with the effects, I have two questions in particular about the blood. How much do you know how much you went through, and how did you get it to look as gnarly as it did? Because I love blood effects, and the blood in this movie is so vivid and just fucking gnarly.
Well, you can chalk that one up to a lovely South African man named Paul Hanrahan, who was our colorist. He's a fellow who works in Taiwan. He's been living there, I believe, since I don't know, maybe 2009 or something. But he works at a post place, and we just got in touch with him, and you know, he's actually the one who really you know, the blood itself looked pretty good, but I'd say that the way that it looks in the final version of the film, like that rich, bright, just kind of like, you know, really the blood that makes you salivate. It's all because of him, his color work. although that is to say that, that's I'm not being fair in saying that it wasn't also the special effects team. Like they have to develop like the right consistency and the right opacity of the blood.
That
as
consistency,
far as, like, right? As far as the chroma is concerned, I definitely give a lot of credit to Paul for coloring it, because when it goes on your clothing too, it tends to kind of look Kool-Aid-y, and he was able to kind of do some tricks to sort of keep that sort of realistic blood look, even when it is sort of looking a bit Kool-Aid-y.
That's amazing.
Maybe if you can, what kind of moment or set piece were you most proud of being able to pull off in the film? Because there's quite a few of like really intense set pieces and moments of violence. So I'm just curious which one you were the most excited that you were able to get on camera.
Well, to be honest, like, my favorite moment in the film is actually the finale when Regina Leigh, the cat character, when she kind of has, when the line is delivered, the sort of the pull the rug out from under you line, and she gives sort of her performance at the end. I don't want to spoil it, but when she gives that sort of that finale performance, I that is actually like my favorite. That was my favorite part to shoot, because I was just so proud of her for being able to nail it like that, because she's not a terribly experienced actress, and she's also kind of young, and also if you met her, you'd see she's sort of just like for lack of a better word, sort of naive, and she's kind of really comes up from a place of just commercials and maybe some TV dramas, and she's not like she's not like the actress in like Titane, let's put it that way. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So seeing her kind of dig deep and really give something meaningful was really, really nice to see, and really kind of like rewarding, I guess, from the perspective of a director. But also the whole train scene, from like the moment that it starts to the part where he sticks his tongue through the grate. I like how just unrelenting that maybe 7-minute sequences. Like but that really is more about, like, it's not so much about the shoot. It's more about just because it's different locations and different days. But I like how that just all works together as one thing. Right. I think that's probably the highlight of the movie for most people. And yeah, that's maybe, from that perspective, I like that part. But I really, my fondest memory of the film was the day that we shot the finale with Regina.
She does put out a very good performance. She goes through a lot of shit in this movie, and that performance, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that at the very end was a very affecting moment for me, as a sort of like that kind of like sadistic, sad cherry on the top of the disturbingness.
I should also mention too, I mean, like the Chen Ingru, the character, the actress who played Molly in the film, a lot of shit went down, like happened to her too. Like she had to roll around, with one eye covered pretty much, like the whole duration of the shoot, almost all of it. And I really believe that she, like the big scene, the scene that everybody was going to be talking about after they see the film. I really believe that scene was sort of, in a way, like a really magical scene to shoot, because it was really just giving two committed actors sort of permission just to kind of do this scene and kind of no rehearsal, just kind of figure it out. I think that scene was also kind of like because that was a day when everybody was really uncertain about how it was going to go down. Like that just kind of went down the way it did, and you want sort of the pain and the humiliation and the outrage and the fear to just kind of be summoned naturally, and I think that Wang Sichang and Ingrid were just awesome with bringing that scene to life and really just making it just unforgettably vile. And at the end of the day, I mean, that's what people are talking about, and maybe that's even some of the reason why people are are loving the film so much because it's kind of, going to those kinds of extremely dark places. You don't get to see that very often anymore.
No, you sure don't.
I mean, that was one of the reasons why I was drawn. I love extreme horror, and I love extremely well-made extreme horror, and yours is a great example of that. It's just like horror that's so fucked up. You're like, why am I watching this? But you can't stop because it's so compelling, and you're like, what's wrong with me? And I should take a shower, but it's also really fucking good. So thank you for that.
Oh, no problem. I'm really happy to hear you guys tell me that you enjoyed it, because I think I like it too, and so I really just tried to make something that I thought, like, this is what I would want to see if I put on the newest horror movie that's supposed to be the coolest horror movie of the year. Like, this is kind of what I would want to see, something like this.
Well, when we saw it at Fantasia, they put all the warnings in front of it, like, this is extreme. This comes with all the trigger warnings. And so you start to like watch and you're like, okay, but is it going to really, embrace that and kind of deliver on that? And I just remember watching most of this movie with my like mouth agape, that I was like, is this really happening? And that, like you said, you don't really get to see that a lot in movies now. I mean, I think most independent filmmaking tends to be on the more, slower side, or the more, slow creeping dread. And
elevated,
so it was quite,
as they say, that label.
So it was quite entertaining to watch something that was like going to just splash everything in red. And I think that's probably why people are talking about it a lot.
Did you see the text between Terry and me when I started watching it? Because Terry had watched it and I hadn't yet, and I was just texting him. Like, my reactions were just like, what? It was incredible. I watched it like 1 a.m, pitch black by myself with my headphones on too. I was like, this will be fine. Man. It won't be that bad. It's like a Thursday.
Copy paste.
Why did I do that?
Copy paste that to me. I want to do that.
Yes, I'll find them, because it's a lot of all caps. Like, what the fuck is happening? It was a lot of that.
I'd appreciate it. That's the kind of stuff that I really love to read. That's what makes it all worthwhile.
Well, we'll try going back and digging through our text and send it to you, because it was wild.
But we've talked about the sadness, and we've talked about your career in horror and your love of horror. But Rob, what movie did you bring with you to discuss today?
Well, I wanted to talk about The Fly, the 1986 David Cronenberg film starring Gina Davis and Jeff Goldblum.
Yes, you did. So, for those of you unfamiliar, The Fly is about a brilliant but eccentric scientist who begins to transform into a giant man-fly hybrid after one of his experiments goes horribly wrong.
Okay, so I gotta know, how old were you when you saw this, Rob? How did you see it? What were your thoughts? I need to know your horror story about this movie.
I grew up in Toronto, in Canada, and there's actually a TV station. There used to be a TV station here called City TV, and I believe that maybe it's still around. I'm not really even sure. I haven't turned on the TV. I haven't turned on the TV since I got back. Back when I was a kid, it was this independent sort of Toronto-centric network. You know what? It's actually the inspiration for the TV station in Videodrome.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think it might be called like Metro TV or whatever, and it's like in Videodrome, but it's based on City TV in Canada, like just sort of this small sort of, it's a local network, but it sort of is trying to compete with like the big networks, like the big three, and in order to do that, they have to be a little spicy sometimes. And the thing is with City TV is they would show movies like unrated, so they'd show like, they show like Final Analysis, and you get to see like Kim Basinger's boobs or something like after 9:00, and it would just be like, you'd be like, holy shit, cause this is awesome. This is Canada, like thank God I live in a free country where I can watch Final Analysis on regular basic cable. But they used to show The Fly quite a lot, and I remember being like a little boy and watching the arm wrestling scene, and the part where Jeff Goldblum breaks that dude's arm, breaks his what do we call that, tibula or whatever that bone's called, and just being so terrified by that, because it's just like you turn it on and it's like, oh, two guys are arm wrestling, cool, and then it's like the arm breaks and it's really just like, oh, holy shit, and then I just turn it off, and then I was just like, ugh, and I like, and then my parents were like, like, Robert, what's wrong with you? And I was just like, nothing, and I just it was one of those things where it's like it's bothering you for like a whole week, and then and you're just thinking about it, and like just because you just saw this for some reason, I don't know what it was, but there was just something absolutely horrific about that scene. And I didn't even know what the hell the movie was either. Like it was until like years later that I saw it again on TV. Yeah, and then I just watched the whole movie from beginning to end, and I mostly was just fixated on the gore, the because you're watching it and you're kind of like, oh weird, cool, and then you're like, oh damn, it's that arm wrestling scene. Oh shit, this is the one, and then after that, he starts pulling off his fingernails, and there's like juice coming out of the fingernails, and his ears are falling off, and then before you know it,
he has his penis in a medicine cabinet.
That was his penis. That was his penis. Okay, I was sorry.
Yeah.
It sure was.
Yeah, and then before you know it, there's this weird sort of herky jerky puppet trying to drag Gina Davis into one of those telepods, and then the movie ends, so that's basically my experience. Because like as a child who likes sort of horror movies, because here's another thing too, is that when I was a kid, like horror movies were like a lot more fashionable, like that's what we would talk about when we were kids. Mm-hmm. Like we would talk about Jason movies and stuff, like that was
right.
And Freddy and stuff, like those were like the things that were cool. I don't know what kids like these days, maybe like I don't know, like Twitch streamers or something. That's what they talk about in the schoolyard.
YouTube. My brother is 19. He likes true crime YouTube videos and other weird shit on YouTube. It's all YouTube.
Wow.
And video games.
Even that seems kind of like even kind of old, kind of long in the tooth. I'm talking about like kids who are like kind of like 10 and 8 now. Like, I mean, are they talking about just like they're talking about Twitch streams and like TikToks and stuff, aren't they? Probably like TikToks are like, oh, they're probably just like, oh, TikTok, whatever, Grandpa. They're into some shit that we haven't even.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, I'm like, look, I'm on TikTok. I'm like, fuck you. I'm like, oh, jeez, I'm trying so hard to say cool.
Yeah. Just stop. Don't just give it a rest. I stopped long ago, trying to be cool. Anyways, all I'm trying to say is that like I fixated on the gore of The Fly. Like that's where I thought the value was. Like I thought the value was like in how gross this movie was, and it wasn't until much later in life, like I'm talking like in my late 20s, that I realized like how like magnificent of a film it is. Like from when I'm looking at it with sort of filmmaker eyes, I'm just like, this is maybe my favorite film. Like maybe of all time. So not only have I chosen like a film that spooked me when I was a child, we're also talking about one that I believe is like my favorite film of all time.
I love that because I saw this probably, it came out in what, 80, 86. Mm-hmm. I probably saw it when I was like 9 or 10. It's sort of in that kind of age of like, I don't know exactly when I saw it. I know that it was not before 8 because I remember seeing my first R-rated movie when I was 8, and it wasn't this. So I remember it was sometime in that time frame, but I was like just entranced at the special effects and the gore. I remember not understanding a lot of what was going on in it, with like the birth sequence and the giant maggot that gets pulled out of her, or like, that dream thing, or like any of the sort of abortion or the sexual aspects of it. Didn't understand, but I knew that it was gnarly as fuck, and it was gross, and it was just body parts falling apart. It was just disgusting. Yeah. And it also kind of taught me about how flies eat, which I never really expected. And from there on, I've been kind of disgusted whenever I see flies, because I think that fly, if it's on anything, it's probably vomited on my food that I'm about ready to eat, and I'm going to be eating fly vomit. So that has stuck with me ever since I was a little kid.
Yum, 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 yum.
Honey is just vomit,
I know.
Right?
I know. I didn't realize that till much later in life, and I'm so thankful that I didn't, because I have a weird revulsion with when I learn about facts about food and then not wanting to ever eat it. So I'm kind of glad I learned about that later.
Yeah, you gotta just sort of turn off that part of your brain and just clean your plate
Wait, so this was your first time watching it though, Mary Beth, right?
It was my first.
Oh yeah, that's so amazing. Mary Beth, I envy you so much. I envy you so much because you got to experience The Fly for the very first time. I'm actually more interested to hear you speak than I am to hear my own stupid voice.
Well, okay, I loved it. We'll start off with that. I did not know a lot about The Fly because I've wanted to see it. It just never happened, but I never really looked into The Fly because I didn't want to know. Like, I wanted to kind of be surprised about, I knew what it was about. Like, I knew man turns into fly, like pretty straightforward that way. I don't think I understood how sad it was going to be and how much of a love story it is.
It's such an amazing love story.
It's an amazing love story. And I've heard about that, but I just didn't expect to be as emotionally affected about a story about a man falling apart into a fly as I was.
Some of the best films, I believe, like ever made are you take a completely ridiculous idea, but you treat it with sort of this like never-ending respect, and then you kind of do it in earnest and really try to sort of just make something amazing. And
I think that's what I love about Cronenberg's movies. It's because like the ideas are so outlandish, and he's really good at body horror. So I feel like a lot of the times I'm expecting these like crazy gonzo stories that are actually really emotionally affecting. Like, I was thinking about Dead Ringers a lot watching this movie. And, these stories that Cronenberg is able to tell with these, like, nasty circumstances, but really is, like, getting to the core about, like, being a person and, like, being a scientist. Like, again, with Dead Ringers and with this, but, like, being a scientist or a doctor and, like, that kind of madness almost that I feel like comes into play and, like, playing that up a lot, especially with The Fly. But I just didn't expect to feel so heartbroken watching and so sad and just it's incredibly well made. And the ending is just, I was eating while I was watching it too, which was a really bad idea. Like, I knew it was going to be a bad idea, but like I didn't truly know how bad of an idea it was until he squeezed his finger and it like kind of popped like a zit. Yeah. And I went and put my food down. I was like, no, cannot do this. Bad idea. And I usually like don't get that grossed out, but like I think just the combination of that and like what I was eating, like taco meat, so like it kind of was like not the best thing to be eating while watching The Fly. So it was an incredible experience, I will say that. And I'm sad I waited so long to see it, but I'm also glad I watched it now where I think I could have a better appreciation of it. I think this a lot about a lot of the movies that I've missed because I have a lot of like older horror movie blind spots. So, but it's really cool to watch these now and I can really appreciate them for what they are and like appreciate every aspect. Like I was so fixed on the score of this film too by Howard Shore.
That's
Howard Shore.
Yeah,
the score to me in this movie was like, again, it could have just been like big and crazy and like, you know, I could just hear in my head the ways the fly motif could have been incorporated in like very obvious ways, but I think, again, the score is very understated and when it needs to be. Like, especially, there's the part... There's the part... I wrote it down. I'm so sorry. I need to pull it up. I can't remember. But it's like... It's when...
The steak.
The steak, yes. Like, when he's like... She's talking about the flesh. And, like, the power of the flesh. And when he's cutting up the steak to put into the teleporter. And it's just, like, this very, like, kind of quiet flute music that isn't, like... It's just... It feels very contemplative, but very hopeful. And very kind of like, but also like hesitantly hopeful. And it was not the kind of score I was expecting, but it really adds to this kind of like the joy at the beginning of this film between the two of them is like they're venturing into this like scientific experiment together, or like she's kind of joining in at the tail end because he's done all the work really, but like they're embarking upon this together. And it's like this, I don't know, it's like flirty and sweet and like, okay, this is really a cool dynamic between the two of them, only for it to be kind of completely decomposing by the end. And I love the way that dynamic is created, not just with the story and the characters and the acting, but with that score as well. I love it when music in a film can add so much to what's going on screen.
I've always said it's 51% of a film is the score, the sound. But what's also cool about the Howard Stern, the Howard Shore soundtrack of The Fly is how like it starts. It's with a black screen. Like you put on the film and it starts with a black screen. It just goes like ba, ba. Like there's kind of this like crazy overture like in the beginning.
Yes.
Like it's almost like an old school move, like an old school film, like where it's like you go and like it's the kind of movie you go see, and you actually put on your nice clothes, and there's like a Wurlitzer organ in the lobby and everything else, and it starts in that classic way with the big overture, and then the movie starts, kind of like how 2001 starts, and also the overture at the very very end, like the death of Brundlefly, amazing, like just unrelenting horns and strings just blasting, and it's just like the most intense thing in the world, and then it just ends on that fade to black, and then deal with that, audience. Here's some fucking credits for you.
Here's your fucking credits. Yeah. It's interesting because Mary Beth, you talked about this sort of like kind of almost playful, kind of hopeful type music. And then there's also the bombast. It actually, watching it now as an adult, it reminded me of the Universal horror monsters. It reminded me of sort of like the sort of bombastic, either like Hammer horror or like the Universal horror that you would get to with like those kind of iconic monsters. And it kind of felt to me like Cronenberg was sort of creating a new modern day in the 80s version of those films. And the story itself is as majestically tragic as a lot of the Universal monster movies are for me. Like I was watching this, I was like, yeah, you can kind of see this sort of Frankenstein or Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde aspect to his story, where he's both, the creator and the creation in effect. And I think the score really plays into that a whole lot, and it can be just as quiet and hopeful as it wants to be, but then turn around and be just blaring bombast and melodrama. And I love it so much.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the romance, because that actually, upon viewing as an adult, that's what it really kind of took me, because it starts out, Jeff Goldblum is kind of like this sort of weak, kind of boyish, kind of bookish nerd kind of guy who's a little bit socially challenged. He doesn't really know how to talk to people properly, but he's also just incredibly charming, and also incredibly just innately sweet, and just irresistible kind of to this strong, sort of like mid 80s style feminist woman, and she kind of puts him in his place early on in the beginning, and she actually tries to fuck him over too. She tries to steal the idea or whatever, you told the reporter, fuck you, I'm a journalist. What did you think this was? Did you think we were going to fall in love, or are we in love right now? She's kind of being almost cruel to him. And then she goes back to her Stathis, the editor,
the editor / former lover,
who's framed this. And this is maybe the best part. Well, not the best part, but maybe the most surprising part of the film is he's framed as like this scumbag. And he's in her apartment showering, and he's just like, what if we just fuck once in a while? Like he's just like a creep, And then anyways, as time goes on, they start to fall in love. Jeff Goldblum and Geena Davis start to fall in love, and you really start to see her soften towards him, and start to like almost, there's this relief that happens with her where she can kind of drop the armor, and she can kind of almost like she can almost sort of like just be kind of like the. I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. Like she just wants to just be feminine and be like the feminine part of the relationship, and she just wants to find the right person who will like allow her to be that way, And then what happens after that is that when he becomes imbued with fly power, he starts to abuse her. He starts to treat her cruelly. That happens so often in relationships, where like when you finally get what you want, you start to abuse what you got, and it's almost like just human nature or something like that. That's something that Cronenberg just does very well in almost every single one of his films. And it's also another point that could be brought up is that when somebody has never really had power before, and all of a sudden they're given all the power in the world, they're bound to abuse it. They have no temperament, they have no tempering of the power. So then finally, like he just kicks her out of it. Fuck you. You're too weak to be with me. I'm gonna go
chicken
hang out
shit,
with this
right?
weird. Yeah. I'm gonna go hang out with this weird lady I brought home from the bar that only has a jean jacket, no bra on. Yeah, well,
as you do.
Yeah, and then finally, like, his at the point where he's literally physically falling apart. Finally, he doesn't have anywhere else to turn to, and he comes crawling back to her, and just whatever it is, like, I mean, maybe it's just because she really was in love with him, and she really still is in love with him, probably, and she understands that it's not his fault. It has to do with just this experiment that's gone wrong. He's sick, right? So she ends up going back to him and just beholding the utter terror that is behind that door, right? And then this is my favorite part. It turns out that it's actually Stathis, that fucking scumbag, who actually is the one who has her best interest in mind. He's actually the one who sticks with her.
Yep.
And this is something that you don't see, like, in a modern movie. That guy would just be framed as a sexist pig, and he would not be granted the possibility of redemption in any way. But in The Fly, it's like, sometimes it's that fucking guy.
It's messy.
Who has your best interest in mind. He's going to take you to get that abortion that you need, and he's going to be the one who goes to that guy's weird fly lair to save you after he abducts you. And ultimately too, like, Brundle's ultimate goal at the end of the film is just he talks about how he wants to be a family in one body and stuff, but really all he's trying to do is just save his own ass. He just wants to maintain his humanity at the cost of Gina Davis, and also at the cost of the unborn child. And it's fucking Stathis who comes in, and it's Stathis who shoots the shotgun that destroys that table that ultimately leads to Jeff Goldblum being fused to the whatchamacallit, to the telepod. Anyways, that's my emotional analysis of The Fly, and that's pretty much like, I mean, that's just such an awesome character story, Another thing too, just while I wrap up this fucking long-winded explanation, is there's never a moment in that entire movie where there's more than like 4 people on screen.
Yes.
It's like a play.
It is like a play.
Yeah.
Oh, that's such a good way to think to think about it. I hadn't thought about it like that, but it is like a play. Huh. But I love what you said about Gina Davis's character, because I'm obsessed with her character. I love her, and I love what you said about her being this like very guarded kind of like figure who needs to protect herself all the time, and then finally find someone where she can like be herself and be comfortable and actually fully relax. Like, she says these like sweet things to him about, and like, where he talks to Eddie about the flesh, and like says all these things where it's like, earlier she was so guarded when Stathis is in her apartment, and she's like, I'm lazy and like I'm fucking lazy and disorganized, which was a mood. But like, she's just so guarded and so like kind of angry and always ready to fight a lot, like in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it probably goes with the territory, being like a journalist, like being a female journalist, and sort of like the sort of the tech
You don't know anything
sector.
about that, do you, Mary Beth?
Don't know anything about being a female journalist and being treated like a lesser being at all. Maybe that's why I like her so much. But also like that trajectory of an abusive relationship as well. Like, I have been in like pretty abusive relationships where the person starts off being really kind and sweet, and then they turn into something that they're not. And you stay because you're like, well, that's the person. And like, what am I going to do? What's going to happen if I leave? I should just stay. And then you stay and things don't get better. And it's just like, that story to me was so deeply affecting. And it's a story about a woman who's like in love with the guy swinging to a fly. Like that, again, like it's just so cool. Like it's amazing how Cronenberg can take these like outlandish topics and make them so meaningful, because like, I also, as a woman, like, I have not myself had an abortion, but you never see abortion talked about so plainly, I feel like, in movies. Mm-hmm. No one says the word abortion. Everyone is it's like tiptoed around a lot of the time. And she just straight up goes...
Take that back to 1986, though, Like, I mean...
Exactly!
The fact that's not just uncommon, that's straight up unheard of.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And like they are actively spending, it's like a good part of the plot is her going to get an abortion because she wants to have control over her own body. And then he fucking takes her out of the abortion clinic because sorry. But like it's just it is such a fantastic film about bodily autonomy, both with like female bodily autonomy, and then also I know Terry, you wanted to talk about this in general. It's not just about her having control over her own like reproductive health and reproductive system and like what is right for her. There's also the bodily autonomy aspect that goes into the whole teleportation device and like what that that means. And Terry, I know you wanted to talk about that, but like.
Well, it's just something that popped out of me where it's like, yeah, she's, you know, the whole towards the end of the film, it's about her wanting to make a decision. And then at the beginning, Stathis is like against, he's like, well, let's wait a few days. And as if he has control over what she wants to do. And then, of course, you know, Seth kidnaps her to stop the abortion from happening. So there's that aspect of it, but then it's also the entire film is about Seth struggling with the fact that he has no autonomy over his own body. It is going to do what it wants to do, and his mind is still there. That's a choice that I really liked that apparently Cronenberg changed from the original script, is to keep him as you know, intelligent and as like talkative as possible throughout the movie because he has his mind, but his body is rebelling against him in the same way that they are not allowing Veronica to have autonomy over her body. And it's just an interesting dynamic.
I'm gonna defend Stathis because you said that he said let's wait a few days. In fact, he just said, because it's late at night, it's like you know, in the wee hours of the morning, and he says, well, you know, we can't do it now. Let's wait till like tomorrow, right? And she goes, no, I want it now. And then what does he do? He makes it happen now,
Sure.
right? So I mean, so you can't talk about him trying to be controlling at that point. I think he was entirely in her corner at that point of the film, you know. And then also, I have to also consider the perspective of Brundle breaking in and stealing the baby, because like. From his perspective of like sort of this existential idea of just like slowly becoming less and less human, you know, in his mind, maybe it's kind of just like the only thing left of me that could possibly be human, because there's no guarantee that the child is going to be all flied out, right? It could be a human baby. So he's kind of thinking of it as like, this is the only thing left of me human that there is, you know. I mean, I'm not saying that it's correct, but I can at least sort of not relate, but I can sympathize, I can empathize with that perspective.
Well, I think that's what Cronenberg does really well, though, is sort of add that nuance. I mean, we were talking about how like you mentioned earlier that Stathis would be in a movie today, he would be sort of like the you know, mustache twirling villain. And by the end of it, there is more nuance to his character. And I think that Cronenberg adds so much nuance to what is happening here that we can sympathize with everyone involved in different ways.
Well, because then, you know, Brundle has that monologue after he grabs her. He's like, it's the only thing that's left of me. Like, it's me. It's not even like, it's so heartbreaking because he's like, that's all that's left of who I am. And she's like, I cannot do this. And he's just like, it's just so, and that's what's so fucking sad. It's just like, you can see the desperation. And like, you know, he steals her out, which is like, you know, I think has a lot to do with talking about like bodily autonomy. But like we said, Cronenberg is like not just saying like, it's not just one message. It's just like, it's a whole bunch of really like complicated things all smashed together where you're sitting there like, what the fuck are you supposed to even do in this situation? Like, I don't know. No one knows. There's like no way to know what to do. And it's just so heartbreaking watching everyone trying to just figure their shit out while this is happening, but they just cannot comprehend what's going on, that they don't know what to do.
Yeah. Ultimately, like what it comes down to is Brundle has to decide, you know, do I choose between her or do I choose between what's left of me? And ultimately he decides that choosing what's left of me is more important than her. So that's where he solidifies his place as the being in the wrong, and that's where we can kind of view him as the villain. But then you know, it's hard for us, and it's also hard for Veronica to put that shotgun to his head and blow his head off at the end as well. You know, because it's definitely not an ideal situation, but.
Nah.
No, it's not.
Nah.
You know, one thing that I started thinking about as I was watching it this time that I kind of clued in on is this kind of the way the movie explores.
Sorry, Terry, before you get on this, I should also mention too that in the end, she's still the credits roll without her with her still pregnant, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point it's just kind of like, what decision will she make, you know? So that it really does sort of speak to the nuance of David Cronenberg, to kind of like you know, leaving that choice up in the air and not really sort of saying what is the right thing to do, which is I think kind of brave and kind of like interesting from a filmmaker's perspective. But I cut you off. Please continue.
Well, I was just thinking that what I kind of clued in on this time was the way that the film kind of explores what identity is and what it means to be yourself. Because the movie does a lot of really good an early establishment of Seth kind of going through the same routine every day. Before he meets Veronica, you know, he's wearing the same suit every day. He's, you know, he knows where he's going to go eat. He knows his routine, so he doesn't have to think about it. So in effect, he's sort of like almost a clone of himself every single day. And then when he's creating this device and he's explaining it to Veronica, he talks about how the device kind of disintegrates someone and then recreates it based on the computer, which makes me wonder, is like, so is Seth really Seth at that point? Or is he kind of a clone that has been created of him, and what part of him is real and what part of him is really himself? And just something that like I was starting to think about, and my mind was just going in a million places as I was contemplating that in terms of what the movie's exploring with that.
That fucked me up a ton watching this. Like one of my first things when he said that, like, oh, it disintegrates it and puts it back together. And I'm like, well, what happens to the original part of you if it like is recreating it? And that got into my head about like, again, identity. Who are you? Are you actually you? Like, how do your memories get like, it was just like, I got really into my own brain about that whole idea of like, and especially when she goes with the steak, when she eats the steak and said it tastes synthetic. So obviously something is lost in translation. So you're not it's not entirely itself. And yeah, like, and you know, we don't necessarily know what happens if Seth did it without the fly in there. But again, like this thing that's like, what is lost in translation and is it worth it? Like, what part of yourself do you lose in that whole process? And that was just like, I really got into my own head about that. Like I get into my head with that kind of thing with like time travel too, with like fucking with like all of that, like on that level. It's just very
well. He also makes the line that was a slogan for Memorex. He's like, is it live or is it Memorex? So is it like a real thing or is it a copy of a thing?
Yeah.
Is it just data that is being kept on a disc? And you know, and so it's that aspect of it that was really like, I really latched onto on this rewatch that I'd never even really thought about before. There's so many like little ways you could look at this movie. It's fascinating.
I always wondered what that steak tasted like.
Right?
You know? Like, do you think it kind of tasted like just like flavor, like just a piece of like unflavored gelatin or something? Like,
well, it reminded me watching this time. I don't know if you guys have ever watched this, but there was this TV show called Better Off Ted, and it was kind of like a satire of kind of these big corporations that say they're doing good things for people and don't. And one of the things they wanted to make was sort of a meatless meat, a product that was meat but wasn't made from meat. And when they have like a taste tester and he eats it and it's like this big glob of like meat cells, and he's like, what does it taste like? He's like, despair. And so that's what I imagine that steak tasting like when I think about it. When I was watching it this time, that was like in the forefront of my mind.
Yeah, despair. I guess they the what do you call it? Telepods are like, I mean, the way you take it is kind of like it destroys you and then it rebuilds like a new one. Or because I guess like I take it kind of like hold on, is the transporter in Star Trek work that way too? Like, does it destroy you and then it makes a new one? Like, so like that's why McCoy never takes the transporter, because he's a doctor. So he's like, oh, I'll rather take the shuttlecraft or whatever. You know, like, is that kind of the is that how it works? Is that because I'm taking like from the internal logic of the film, it's like it dematerializes you, turns you into just like energy, and then reassembles you. So it's like it's still the same essential parts. It's just that I guess whatever, you know, it's not real.
There was another.
It's not. You know, and so I was looking at the. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking of another thing. Not like. I think the jaunt. Never mind. We don't have to. I was thinking about another similar story that has like some. I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, ignore me.
Let's talk about the jaunt. No. Let's talk about the jaunt.
Just kidding. Never mind.
Who cares? We got 10 minutes left. We could talk about the Jaunt in 10 minutes. Did you ever read that, Terry?
No.
You didn't read this by Stephen King, the short story? The Jaunt? Yeah, you should read it. It's fucked up. Anyway,
I've never really read many of Stephen King's like short stories. I'm not a huge short story fan. I'm more of a give me a feature length.
It's a good one. But anyway,
yeah, you can actually on YouTube just find that like as an audiobook, and it'll only take about 90 minutes out of your life, and it's really good. It's really an interesting sort of contemplation of the teleportation and a couple different maybe like socio-political implications of it, and then also sort of like the physiological implication of like what it would mean, etc. But it's a horror story, and it ends on a really, really wild, almost like what's that shit cosmic horror sort of end. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's pretty tight. Anyhow, what else we got? What else are we talking about?
Well, so one of the things that it really popped in my mind watching it this time, and I went and I looked it up, and this was not intentional, but watching this now, especially I guess as a gay man looking back at that era, I got a really huge AIDS metaphor for this in terms of like the way the body would, because even though it's not sex that caused it, it was after he had sex that ends up like falling in love and having a relationship, talking about flesh, and that sort of the craziness that comes from flesh is when he goes in the machine out of jealousy and gets it. And then there's so much like, I don't know, seminal like imagery in this, everything about him is all fluidy and white and stuff. And it's the idea of the body, like kind of vomiting up, and like his fingers, when he's grabbing the guy's hand and he's going to break it, there's like white goo pouring out of it. There's like so much white goo in this movie. And between that and the idea of like your body kind of turning against you, it just sort of like, I saw a huge AIDS metaphor in this, even though Cronenberg, I found a quote from him that talks about how if you or your lover has AIDS, you watch the film and of course you'll see AIDS in it. And he's like, and that's not to say that AIDS didn't have an incredible impact on everyone. Of course, after a certain point, people are seeing AIDS stories everywhere. He's like, so I don't take offense that people saw that in my movie, but for him, there was something more about universal and aging and death and something we all have to deal with. But like, I don't know, looking back on it now and seeing that kind of era, it's hard for me not to see sort of that aspect of it.
Yeah.
I get that a lot with like with the sadness people, when I do like Q&As and stuff or interviews and stuff, people will always talk to me. They're always like, so, did you intend for this to be an allegory about sort of Taiwan's relationship with China? And I'm just like, nope, not even a little bit. And I always get sort of, were you like an American crowd will be kind of like, so the virus, it essentially separates people. It like divides people. So like, were you conscious of the fact that you were like creating like a virus that would like makes people hateful of each other and unable to communicate or something like, you know what I mean? Like sort of the vaccine politics or just pandemic politics. And I was just like, nope, I wrote this way before any of those things sort of happened. So it really speaks to sort of the truth of, you bring your own crayons to the coloring book,
Yeah.
I understand sort of, cause I mean, the union of a fly and a man that could be perceived. And I believe it's even alluded to in the film. He goes like, we don't, he didn't even take me out for dinner, or he said something like that. He's like, it's sort of like he's had sex with a fly, or he's had sort of like a intimate union with a fly, and then oh, look what happens, this falling apart of this sort of progressive loss of integrity of the body. I mean, I can think of a lot of things that get called an AIDS allegory that are way less on the nose than the fly. Right. Like but at the same time, I mean, if the guy, and here's another thing too. I mean, if David Cronenberg, if he says that he didn't intend to, I mean, we got to take him for his word. However, it's impossible to make something in a time and not have it be somewhat representative of the time that it's made in. Just that stuff just comes in no matter what. No matter how hard you try, that stuff comes in. because it's just part of how you think at that time.
Yeah.
Unless you're completely, shut off like the Unabomber and you're just kind of living in a cabin.
Right.
Well, it's just interesting thinking about that, and just like I'm a horror academic first and foremost, and I've spent most of my time and a lot of my money in grad school on like putting a lot of like applying my own an academic but personal lens to things. And it's just so interesting to think about, like, I have, like, written so many words about so many different things, and, like, the director was probably like, oh, I never fucking thought about that when I made the movie, but that's cool as hell. Like, it's just interesting to think about that relationship between, like, the filmmaker and their text versus what other people perceive it. That's always such a fascinating thing. I've never made a film, so I'm coming from the academic, like, writer perspective of the whole thing, but it is really cool and fascinating to see what people pull out of stuff.
Well, that's what makes art, right?
Yeah, it's just neat.
Yeah, I mean, I bet people like, I really need to start getting better at like doing Q&As and interviews and stuff, because like I kind of come off as just sort of this like loopy bro, and people like are often disappointed when because they watch The Sadness and they kind of get in their idea that it's going to be like this, first of all, it's going to be a Taiwanese guy, and it's going to be like, and it's going to be some guy who's like, well, let me tell you about my film that I made. I meant like, I'm all like, very, very severe about like the film and like all this stuff. Really, like, sorry to disappoint everybody, but like, I'm just sort of like this Canadian guy who ended up in Taiwan and just have a real fetish for gore. And also, I also have a real love of horror and sort of the mechanical construct of sort of the action horror situation. And all of the things in The Sadness really are in service of like the terror and sort of just eliciting a reaction from the audience. And the only sort of subtext or things beyond what's surface level. Is just that I wanted to make a film where like people who are kind of maybe feel like society has failed them, like sort of incel energy type people who just don't seem to get along with other people and just aren't able to sort of form meaningful relationships, friendship or romantic or otherwise. They finally, there's a virus that finally comes and all of a sudden the world is theirs, and this world turns into just this place just full of hate and destruction, and then what happens is they find meaning in that. They find meaning and purpose in that. Conversely, a well-adjusted couple who seems to be functioning adequately and healthily in society, their life completely is destroyed, and so it's this sort of dark kind of Revenge of the Nerds situation. Yeah. Maybe that's just sort of why it feels so ugly. Why the film feels sort of ugly the way it does, and also mean-spirited, because that's kind of the energy I think that it's tapping into, and it's there's no justice in the film. There is a little bit of justice, like Molly gets her justice, and Kat gets her justice in the end, maybe, but it's mostly just unfair, and it's sort of sad.
Yeah.
The sadness.
The sadness.
Is there anything else you wanted to touch on with The Fly, or do we want to wrap this up and give it our rating out of 5?
Oh, let's do that.
All right, cool. All right, Terry, how many maggot babies out of 5 do you give The Fly?
I mean, there's no beating around the bush for this. This is a 5 maggot baby movie for me. I've loved this movie since I was a kid, and it's one of those movies where at different points in my life, I'm picking up new things. And every time I've watched this movie, I don't know, a couple dozen times. And every single time I watch it, I focus on something new. And I think that that's what's so great about this film. It's a commercial Cronenberg movie that doesn't sacrifice his weirdness and doesn't sacrifice the gore, and instead kind of brings it up into, I mean, when watching it this time, it was kind of nostalgic a little bit, but to see the 20th century, dun, 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 and I'm like, yeah, this is a studio movie that has a fucking maggot baby. And yes, it's a dream, but there is a fucking maggot baby in this. And there's a penis in a fucking medicine cabinet, and this guy's fingers are coming off. I mean, this movie is like, I can't believe it got made, and I'm so happy that it did. And I think it's a classic. I think it is perfect. I wouldn't change a single thing about this movie. What about you, Mary Beth?
I think I also give it 5 maggot babies. I wasn't even 4.5 because I really hated Stathis, like with a fiery passion, and I was really annoyed that he ended up being the hero at the end. But in us discussing it, I kind of get it a little bit. I'm a little less annoyed, and it's like a little bit more okay, like thinking it through a little bit more, like, you know. So I've changed my mind. I'm still annoyed, but I appreciate it. And so I will give this 5 maggot babies because everything you said, Terry, plus what I also really loved is that this wasn't a movie that was trying to give you like the life story of Seth Brundle and like his whole scientific like history. It wasn't trying to give you some tragic backstory about Gina Davis's character. Like, it's very tight. Everything you need to know about the characters is done through performances and like through their personalities. And yeah, there are some like tidbits kind of given like about their past, but it's not ever trying to really make these characters and like tell their whole life story. It's about them there and now. And I really loved how successful that was, on top of how sad it made me and on top of how romantic it is. Just a lot of things I wasn't expecting, and it's just like blew my expectations out of the water. I knew it was going to be good. I did not think I could love it as much as I did, which is incredible. So 5 maggot babies out of 5 for me. Okay, Rob, you have the final word. How many maggot babies out of 5 are you giving the Fly? I think we know, but
well, I give it 5 because I already told you it's like probably my favorite. Probably my favorite horror movie. Maybe not my favorite movie, like I said earlier, although it depends on sort of the given day. I think that, like just to what you were saying before, like I understand what you mean when it's like he's kind of set up as this jerk off who thinks he kind of has control over this woman. And then he kind of fights her for control. But then eventually he kind of he surrenders to her, and remember what he says? He says, I just don't want you out of my life. You know, like he kind of appeals to her, and then that she kind of maybe respects him, maybe for being honest or something. And then at the end, he's not the hero because he gets his fucking hand vomited off, and he gets his foot melted off at the ankle, right? So like
gnarly.
That's not terribly heroic. But the one thing that we can say in his defense is that he was ride or die for her. Like he was on her side at that point when she goes back to him. He's on her side 100%, and he fights for her. You know, like against all odds, against the weird fly dude. And you know what? I'm a big fan for the unpopular redemption arc. And I think the more terrible thing that someone does to someone, and then sort of if you through film can kind of create a satisfying redemption arc. This also, Terry, happens, I believe, in Titan. I think Titan is all about this redemption arc. I think that's just a story that is I find to be very satisfying. I find to be satisfying because it's a challenging story to tell, to kind of make an audience really hate someone and then kind of win them back. Although I in your case, Mary Beth, it took us having this talk to win you back. So,
I've also known a few too many creepy guys might have something to do with it.
Yeah. Hey, all I got to do is look in the mirror. You know what I'm saying? I really liked having this talk. I think it's fun. I think it's fun to talk about The Fly.
Hell yeah,
it is fun to talk about The Fly.
On that note, thank you so much, Rob, for joining us to talk about The Fly and The Sadness. Where can our listeners find you, and what do you have that you'd like to share? Do you have any news on where The Sadness is going to play next or anything like that?
Well, as of the date of this recording, The Sadness will play in a lot of places in Europe. It'll play at the Torino TO Horror Festival. It'll play in Sitges in Spain. I don't know that you have too many like listeners that are Italian or Spanish.
I have a couple.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so those are the 2 places for those people. It'll also play in Berlin at some sort of fantasy fest, which I can't remember the name of, and then also, but you can look it up. I don't know, just type in The Sadness and find it at your local festival, because we're still on the festival circuit. I'll be going to Telluride, Colorado for the Telluride Horror Show, which I'm looking forward to a whole lot, because
it's that town looks beautiful. It's a great festival. That was my very first festival in 2018, and it was fabulous. You're going to have a great time there.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I know of a few filmmakers that are going to that one, and like not many others over the year. So I'm excited to kind of link up. I'm really enjoying like meeting like other filmmakers and kind of, you know, and kind of being able to come at them, because I've always been a fan. So it's nice to sort of being able to come at them as a contemporary and be kind of like, hey, I like your work. Hey, I like yours too. You know, it's kind of a cool sort of like, I've arrived. I can talk to filmmakers like that. Cool. Anyways, yeah. So if you want to find me though, my name is Rob Jabbaz, ROBJABBAZ, and I'm the only person in the whole world who has that name. So just like Google it. I'm pretty active on Instagram. So just like if y'all want to add me on Instagram, then you know, I post stuff.
Cool.
Hell yeah.
So you've heard from us. We want to hear from you. What was your experience with The Fly? You can send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us directly on Twitter. I am at MB McAndrews.
And I'm McGailey Dreadful.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please, if you're listening on iTunes, just go give us a little rating and review. It really helps.
Please. Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thanks everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there. Most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room?
It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.